Good evening and welcome to the Thursday, October 25th, 2018 regular meeting of the Brisbane Planning Commission. Meeting will now come to order. Could we please have a roll call?
Yes, Commissioner Gomez.
Here.
Commissioner Sayasan.
Here.
Commissioner Patel.
Here.
Commissioner Gooding.
Here.
And Chair Mackin.
Here. Thank you. Could we have a motion for adoption of tonight's agenda, please?
I make a motion.
And a second?
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? No.
Well, actually, I will abstain with respect to the August 23rd meeting because I was absent.
Oh, good. That's fine. That's fine. Thank you. Okay, we move on to the consent calendar. Tonight we have two items: approval of the draft action minutes of our meeting April 23rd, 2018 and September 27th, 2018. Is there anyone who would like to remove an item from the consent calendar for further discussion? Seeing none. Okay, we have a motion to approve the consent calendar, please.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? No. Okay, moving on. Oral communications. Is there anyone tonight who would like to address any item that does not appear on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on. We have no written communications, so we'll move into our main item tonight, new business. It's a public hearing. This is a zoning text amendment. This is RZ-6-18, and this is to modify the permitted operating hours for a cannabis business. City of Brisbane is the applicant. Could we have a staff report?
Yes, good evening, Chairperson and Commission. The zoning text amendment case before you tonight is to amend the operating or performance standards applicable to cannabis businesses contained in Chapter 17.33. This is to implement certain City Council direction that was provided to staff in prior hearings when they were considering amendments to the ordinance. Specifically, in April of this year, Council adopted an Ordinance 625 to adopt your recommended changes to the cannabis regulations to eliminate the 600-foot radius prohibition for businesses within 600 feet of a school or daycare. At that hearing, there was a business representative from actually a prospective applicant for a cannabis business who requested that the council modify the operating hours. So as written right now in Chapter 17.33, it imposes a limitation on any cannabis business activity between the hours of 7 p.m. and 8 a.m. So at that hearing in April, council heard out this prospective applicant. They didn't make any move at the time since the ordinance before them had already gone through public hearings with you. But they did highlight that with staff as something to study and to bring back for further discussion in terms of whether modifications to the operating hours were warranted. Since that time, you guys have seen now 2 use permit applications for cannabis businesses and approved those applications for retail delivery, distribution, and light manufacturing at 2 sites in Crocker Park. We also have a application that was just submitted recently that we anticipate will be before you in December for similar operations at another property in Crocker. And of course, staff is dealing with a lot of interest in the business community. So we're constantly kind of fielding questions and inquiries from the cannabis business world, and a kind of constant feedback that we're hearing from these businesses and that you have heard, I think, at previous public hearings is, again, the operating hours being a limitation to their business model, and specifically retail delivery. As you've heard anecdotally, oftentimes the retail delivery, which is direct to customer delivery, cutting it off at 7 p.m. can be difficult for a lot of customers if they aren't home at that time, for example. So with all of that feedback and kind of experience that staff has gained now in processing those applications we've gotten so far, planning staff worked with police to consider whether those operating hours should be modified. So in coordination with the police, essentially we've drafted the zoning text amendments before you tonight. So those would slightly extend the permitted operating hours for retail deliveries. That would allow retail delivery operations to continue until 10 p.m. and then start up again at 8 a.m. So that would be 3 additional hours compared to the current regulations, which say you have to stop at 7. And then all other cannabis business operations would be subject to whatever operating hour restrictions apply to that district they're in. Obviously, in Crocker Park, we have prohibition on night operations if the property is within 300 feet of a residential property. So that type of operating restriction would apply to any cannabis businesses also falling within that radius. And of course, the commission, if they felt the context was necessary, whether it's because of the nature of the business or the location of the property, you can always impose operating hour limitations in your use permit. That's a power that you have, that you've always had, to impose special conditions on a use if you feel it's necessary. So I think I'll leave our report at that. We are recommending adoption of the resolution to recommend approval of the ordinance to the City Council, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Julia. Commissioner Saison, you want to start? Any questions?
Just a clarification. So when it says here deliveries not going past 10, does that mean at the time the vehicle leaves, or they should be arriving at the home around 10?
We've actually had that same exact question posed to us by an applicant. I think holistically, when we say delivery activity is stopping at 10, that means vehicles exiting and entering the property to conduct that business stops at 10. So I would assume that any delivery vehicles need to be back by 10. That being said, code enforcement here is complaint-based. Whether or not the police department has plans to kind of, proactively monitor that by staking out, different areas in town to make sure that that curfew is being complied with exactly, that's certainly something that could happen. But I think in general, we expect all delivery activity to cease by 10. So they have to be back on the property by that time.
Okay, so they're not making home deliveries at 10 o'clock then, since they have to be back by 10.
Yeah, I would assume so. Unless, and we do have actually one of our permittees here who may be able to enlighten us in terms of protocol. But for example, if it's a delivery driver who's perhaps just picking up their personal vehicle at the property, I don't know that we consider someone coming back to the property to just get back in their personal car and leave as being a violation of that, 10 p.m. delivery cutoff. So, yeah, does that help a little bit? Okay.
Anything else? No? Nope. Okay. Commissioner Gomez?
I don't have any questions for staff.
Okay. Commissioner Goody?
Thank you. So I noted that there was reference to the police department having reviewed the application or the concept.
Mm-hmm.
Do they have any feedback in particular one way or the other?
Well, we created this with the police. So this was a collaborative effort. So they support these amendments. It's probably a better.
They have no objection to the extension of the hours?
No, I relied on them for their expertise, because when we talked about having these performance standards to begin with 2 years ago, which seems like forever ago now, it really was a safety-based requirement. So it came from police to begin with. So the police department is the one who actually was the primary, author behind these. Yes, they very much support the changes.
Okay.
They're comfortable with them.
Thank you.
Commissioner Patel?
I have no questions.
And I have no questions. So at this point, we'll move on to open. It is a public hearing. If we have anyone from the audience, I understand we have a permit holder. We'd love to hear from you if you'd step to the podium and kindly state your name for the record, please.
Madam Chair and Commissioners, Rand Martin here on behalf of Caliva. We were here just a few weeks ago with our CUP permit. I won't take a whole lot of time. I think Julia has done a good job in giving an overview of it. I would just make 3 very quick points for you to keep in mind. One is that this is a consumer access issue, especially having just driven down to the Bay Area from Sacramento. Traffic down here right after work is abysmal, and it's really hard for people to get home in time to order if they choose to do so. Moving till 10 o'clock would obviously allow them that ability to do so. It also helps us as a business. Cutting off at 7 o'clock cuts off a very large percentage of our market. Out of our San Jose facility, we've been doing retail delivery for a couple of years. About 24% of our customers order their product after 7 p.m. and get it delivered after 7. So a large portion of it. That ultimately affects the city as well, because that means that if we have less revenue from our customers, you have less sales tax revenue. But the third one, and getting to your point about the police department, I'm not going to speak for the police department by any stretch of the imagination, but we've talked to law enforcement around the state about issues like this. And I expect that what the police department is thinking is they have better control if they have regulated entities that are providing this delivery service. If you go on Craigslist or any number of sites like that, you will find people more than willing to deliver illegal cannabis products to your home at any time of the day or night. Even though they might get arrested in the process, but it's really hard to identify somebody who's driving a unmarked vehicle that person is driving illegal cannabis to a resident. If a resident has difficulty getting their cannabis through legal means, but they want to get it, they're going to go on Craigslist and they're going to ask Joe Blow to drive his car over and drop off cannabis. Making sure that your population has a legal place to go all the way up until 10 o'clock at night gives them an opportunity to go to the legal market instead of the illegal market, and helps us generally shrink that illegal market as much as we possibly can, which is one of the primary goals of the current cannabis law. So you all have the city has a very profound interest in keeping this as regulated as possible, and this is one of those ways of doing it. I'll leave it at that, and I'm certainly happy to answer any questions. I will say, in answer to the question about 10 p.m., state law has some restrictions as well about how long you can go. In fact, they've gone through so many iterations of the regulations, I hope I'm still stating this correctly, is that they see 10 o'clock as a cutoff time as well. I know that San Jose, where we operate currently, sees 10 o'clock as a cutoff time. So we have done our delivering. I'm not sure that we're always right back in the parking lot exactly at 10 o'clock, but our drivers are on their way back by 10 o'clock to make sure that the delivering is done by that time.
Okay, if you could stay there, do we have any questions from commissioners?
Just one, which is, the initial request or the application was for the then established hours until 7 p.m. and now we're asking for 10 p.m. Do you anticipate ever asking for anything later than 10 p.m.?
I would say at this point no, because I think there is a natural cutoff to when consumers generally want access to it. Yes, there's always going to be somebody who's looking for cannabis at midnight, but we're not particularly interested in sending our drivers out in the dead of night to deliver cannabis. It puts them at greater risk. And by 10 o'clock, people are still awake. There's still a lot of activity. We don't feel that drivers are at security risk at that time. But the later you go and the more in the wee hours you get to, I think you find those opportunities for something bad to happen to your driver increase. So we're not particularly interested in putting them in that position.
Thank you.
Any other questions? So I'm just going to ask one. Just your operating procedures backwards and forwards. What do you do when you have this 10 p.m. deadline? You've got a car out making deliveries and they don't come back. What do you assume?
If they don't come back, we probably send the cops out looking for them.
No, I'm just curious.
Yeah. No, I'm
because then
serious.
someone would say, if that happened once or it happened twice or 3 times, how do you handle that with the driver? Just to give us a little assurance of what kind of restrictions or controls you place.
Well, it really depends on the circumstances. Obviously, if you've got a driver who's decided to become a bad egg and drives off with, that person is violating all sorts of felonies, we'll send the cops out after them because it reflects badly on us, obviously, if that happens. It has never happened out of San Jose. People are well screened, they're well trained, they're bonded. So we're very protective of the people who work for us. But we're also very, very attuned to the possibility that somebody could go awry. If it's a situation where somebody's in a situation where it's not of their making, they don't show up, and not because they have absconded, but because they are in a position of some insecurity. then we will also follow up immediately. I mean, they are GPS, they're tracked when they're out on the road. We know where they are at all times. We have access to them at all times, so we would find them as quickly as we possibly could if they were in trouble in some way. But that, the GPS tracking and all that is really important to us because it protects our drivers and it protects us.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Any other questions come up? No? Thank you very much.
Great, thank you
Appreciate
so
it.
much.
Is there anyone else who'd like to make a comment or address the commission? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
A second?
Second?
All in favor? Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? No. Okay. Deliberations. Commissioner Patel, you want to start?
I'm good with it. I think we've discussed all of these issues prior, and I'm ready to vote.
Okay. Commissioner Gooding?
Yeah, nothing further. My only interest was, do we have some mission creep happening of asking for later and later hours? But if 10 o'clock is kind of a gold standard or a norm in the industry, and that's kind of a stopping point, I'm satisfied.
Commissioner Sayasan?
No questions.
Commissioner Gomez?
No, just a small comment. I mean, as I was reading the document, and as the legal market matures, I was thinking in my mind, it might not be the best analogy, but it's kind of like restaurant deliveries, right? Those typically run 9, 10 o'clock at night. I don't really know too many that go beyond 10 o'clock at night, so it seems pretty darn logical, because I was thinking about this, trying to poke holes in it. So I think we're on the right path here. So, I'm fine.
Staff, any comments you want to insert at this point?
No.
Okay,
I mean, I would say
easy.
from the issue that Commissioner Gooding raised regarding potentially in the future, how we'd react to requests to extend hours even further. I mean, like I said, we worked with the police department on drafting, what time was the right time for retail delivery, and 10 was the right time for police. I can't speak for them, they're not here, but I would assume if they were okay with later that we would have discussed that at this point. So I think we can be secure that from the city's perspective and police safety perspective, 10 will be our bottom line limit.
Okay, very good. It sounds like we're pretty much in agreement, ready to vote. So we'll take a motion. This would be for approval of RZ-6-18. Who'd like to make a motion? Commissioner Gooding?
So moved.
Okay, and a second, please.
I second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? No. Motion carries. I'll read the appeals process. Anyone may appeal the action of the Planning Commission on a use permit application to the city not later than 6 calendar days following the Planning Commission's decision. Contact the city clerk. Okay, thank you very much. Let's see, items initiated by staff?
Just a few items. First is just to mention to you that the mobile home park regulations that you recommended to City Council, they have heard and approved, and that'll come back for a second reading in November 8th. Also a reminder that we'll be shifting the schedule for November to be the 3rd and 5th Thursdays of the month. And Julie, if you...
November 15th and November 29th.
And then there was one other.
And then one more item. So I'm sure you guys recall you saw a couple study session presentations from the applicants of 3000 Marina Boulevard, the life sciences project out in Sierra Point. I just wanted to kind of give you an update that we anticipate they'll be, their public hearing will be on November 29th. And due to the Thanksgiving holiday, we're going to try to get that staff report out to you guys and the whole agenda, several days early to give you more time with the holiday. And we'll also probably be releasing the public draft of the initial study earlier as well, in excess of the minimum noticing time frame to give you guys and the public more time to review.
Great, thank you very much. Any items initiated by the commission? No? Okay. So I'll just, again, note that our next meeting will not be on November 8th. It will be Thursday, November 15th, 2018 at 7:30 p.m. At this point, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 No one opposed? Good night. Thank you very much.